The wind howled through the pines, carrying the sharp scent of cedar and the weight of my unspoken truth. I'd been carrying it for years, a secret so heavy it felt like a stone lodged in my chest. And today, on this trail, I'd finally set it free. But as I looked at Javier, his silhouette framed against the fading sun, I wondered if the truth would break us or make us whole. My name is Caleb Monroe, a 25-year-old graphic designer from Seattle, with skin dark as the coffee I drank every morning and a heart that beat too fast around Javier Morales. He was my best friend, my hiking buddy, the guy who'd been there through every late-night crisis and every stupid laugh. Javier, 26, was a physical therapist with a smile that could melt glaciers and eyes that saw right through me. We'd been inseparable since college, but he'd come out as gay 2 years ago, and I'd been wrestling with my own feelings ever since. Not just for him, but for who I might be. The trail we chose was in the Olympic National Forest, a grueling 5-mile climb to a lookout called Storm Point. It was late September, the air crisp, the leaves a riot of red and gold. I'd picked this hike deliberately. It was remote, quiet, the kind of place where truths could spill without witnesses. My backpack felt heavier than usual, not from the water or granola bars, but from the words I'd rehearsed 100 times. Javier, I think I'm in love with you, and I think I might be gay. Yo, Caleb, you good? Javier's voice snapped me back. He was a few steps ahead, his hiking boots crunching on the gravel path. His denim shirt was rolled up to his elbows, showing off the tattoos on his forearms. A compass, a mountain range, symbols of his love for adventure. He turned, his brown eyes catching the light, and my stomach flipped. Yeah, just taking it all in. I lied, adjusting my cap. The trail was steep now, winding through dense forest, the kind that made you feel small and insignificant. Perfect for what I had to do. I'd spent months agonizing, questioning everything, my faith, my family, the way I'd always assumed I was straight. But every time Javier laughed, or brushed my arm, or looked at me a second too long, the questions got louder. We'd hiked together dozens of times, but this felt different. There was a charge in the air, like the moment before a storm. Javier had been quieter than usual too, his usual banter replaced by long stretches of silence. I wondered if he sensed what was coming, or maybe he had his own secrets. By noon, we reached a clearing halfway up the trail. A small stream cut through the rocks, and we stopped to refill our bottles. Javier knelt by the water, his fingers trailing in the current. This place is unreal, he said, glancing up at me. Makes you feel like you could say anything, and the mountains would just keep it safe. My heart stuttered. Was that an opening? I opened my mouth, but the words stuck. Instead, I nodded, crouching beside him. Our shoulders brushed, and I felt the warmth of him through my flannel. Yeah, I managed. It's like the world pauses up here. He looked at me, his gaze lingering. You've been weird all day, man. What's up? I froze. This was it, the moment. But the fear clawed at me, the same fear that had kept me quiet for years. What if he didn't feel the same? What if I lost him? My family was religious. My dad a pastor who preached love but drew hard lines. Coming out could mean losing them too. I stood, brushing dirt off my knees, and muttered, "Just tired, I guess." Javier raised an eyebrow but didn't push. He stood too, slinging his pack over his shoulder. "Come on, let's hit the summit before the sun dips. I'm not carrying you back down." I forced a laugh, but my chest ached. The trail grew steeper, the air thinner, and with every step, the weight of my silence grew. I had to tell him. I had to. By late afternoon, we reached Storm Point. The view was staggering, jagged peaks stretching to the horizon, a valley cloaked in mist, the sky burning orange and pink. Javier dropped his pack and spread his arms, letting out a whoop that echoed. "This is why we do it, Caleb. This right here." I smiled, but my hands were shaking. I set my pack down and stepped to the edge of the outcrop, the wind tugging at my jacket. Javier joined me, standing so close I could smell the cedar on his skin. "You ever feel like you're standing at the edge of something bigger than you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He turned, his expression soft but unreadable. "All the time." I swallowed hard. The words were there, clawing to get out. "Javier, I need to tell you something." His eyes locked on mine, steady, searching. "Yeah." My mouth went dry. I've been thinking a lot. About me. About us. My voice cracked, and I hated it. "I think I'm—" Before I could finish, his hand brushed mine, deliberate, warm. My breath caught. He stepped closer, his gaze never leaving mine. "Caleb," he said softly, "you don't have to say it." And then he leaned in, his lips meeting mine in a kiss that felt like the mountain itself. Wild, unshakable, alive. For a moment the world stopped. There was only him, only us, and the truth I'd been so afraid to face. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright, a mix of fear and hope. "I've wanted to do that for years," he whispered. I stared at him, my heart pounding. "Why didn't you?" He laughed, a shaky sound. "Same reason you didn't. Scared I'd ruin everything." We stood there, the wind swirling around us, the truth laid bare. But the hike wasn't over, and neither was our story. There were still miles to go, miles to figure out what this meant. For me, for him, for the world waiting below. The kiss lingered in the air like the echo of a shout, raw and undeniable. My lips still tingled, my mind a chaotic swirl of fear, relief, and something dangerously close to joy. Javier stood inches away, his breath uneven, his eyes searching mine for what came next. I wanted to say something, anything, to anchor this moment, but words felt too small. The vastness of Storm Point stretched around us, the peaks indifferent to the earthquake in my chest. I'd spent years building walls around my feelings, walls my family, my church, my own doubts had reinforced. And in one moment, Javier had torn them down. "Caleb," he said, his voice low, "you okay?" I nodded, then shook my head, laughing at my own confusion. "I don't know what I am right now." He smiled, that crooked grin that always made my heart skip. "Fair. That was a lot." We sat on the outcrop, our knees brushing, the sunset painting the sky in hues of fire. I told him everything. The nights I'd lain awake, questioning who I was. The guilt that clung to me like damp moss. The fear of what my family would say. My dad's sermons rang in my ears. Love the sinner, hate the sin. But this didn't feel like sin. Felt like truth. Javier listened, his face soft but serious. When I finished, he took my hand, his fingers warm against mine. "I came out to my mom last year," he said. "She cried, not because she was mad, but because she was scared for me, scared of the world. But she came around. People do sometimes." I wanted to believe him, but the weight of my dad's voice, my mom's expectations, pressed against me. "My family's different," I said. "They're rigid. I don't know if they'll ever get it." He squeezed my hand. "You don't have to tell them yet, or ever if you're not ready. But you've got me. You've always got me." The words were a lifeline, but they didn't erase the fear. What did this mean for us? Were we friends who'd crossed a line or something more? I didn't even know what I wanted to call myself. Gay. By something else entirely. All I knew was that Javier's hand in mine felt like the only steady thing in the world. We started the descent as the light faded, the trail growing dim and treacherous. Javier led the way, his flashlight beam cutting through the dusk. Every few steps, he glanced back, like he was checking I was still there. But my mind was racing. The kiss had changed everything, and I wasn't sure I was ready for the fallout. Halfway down, we stopped at a fork in the trail. A sign pointed left to the main path, right to a longer, scenic route along a ridge. "Which way?" Javier asked, his tone light but his eyes heavy with meaning. I hesitated. The main path was safer, quicker. The ridge was riskier, exposed. But something in me wanted to take the harder road, to see where it led. "Ridge," I said. He grinned. "That's my guy." The ridge trail was narrow, the drop-off steep. We walked single file, the wind biting at our faces. Javier hummed softly, a habit of his when he was nervous. I wanted to ask what he was thinking, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I focused on the crunch of gravel under my boots, the rhythm of our steps. Then, out of nowhere, Javier stopped. I nearly bumped into him. "What's wrong?" I asked. He turned, his face half lit by the flashlight. "I need to know something. That kiss, was it just the moment? Or is it real for you?" My pulse spiked. I'd been asking myself the same thing, but hearing it from him made it real. "It's real," I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "You're real. I don't know what comes next." He stepped closer, his breath visible in the cold air. "We figure it out. Together." I nodded, my throat tight, but as we continued down the trail, a new fear crept in. What if together wasn't enough? What if the world, my world, wouldn't let us be? By the time we reached the trailhead, it was dark. The parking lot was empty except for my beat-up Subaru. We tossed our packs in the trunk, and Javier leaned against the car, his arms crossed. "You want to grab food?" he asked, casual, like we hadn't just rewritten our entire friendship. I laughed, the tension easing a fraction. "Yeah, but not some dive bar. Somewhere nice." His eyes lit up. "You asking me on a date, Monroe?" My face burned, but I held his gaze. "Maybe I am." We drove to a small bistro in Port Angeles, a cozy spot with fairy lights and a view of the harbor. Over burgers and craft beer we talked, not about the kiss but about everything else. His dream of opening his own PT clinic, my latest design project, the time we got lost on a trail in Oregon and argued for hours. Felt normal but charged, like every word carried a new weight. As we left the bistro, Javier grabbed my hand, quick and sure, like he was claiming something. I didn't pull away, but in the back of my mind, I knew the real test was coming. Tomorrow, I'd be back in Seattle, back in my life, where secrets didn't stay buried forever. The drive back to Seattle was quiet, the hum of the engine filling the space where words should have been. Javier stared out the window, his profile sharp against the city lights as we crossed the Puget Sound. My hands gripped the wheel, my mind replaying the kiss, his hand in mine, the promise of together. But promises were fragile, and I wasn't sure I was strong enough to keep them. Back in the city, reality hit like a cold wave. My apartment in Capitol Hill was a mess of sketchpads and coffee mugs, a stark contrast to the wild freedom of the trail. Javier crashed on my couch, too tired to drive to his place in Fremont. I watched him sleep, his chest rising and falling, and felt a pang of something I couldn't name. Hope, maybe, or dread. The next morning, I woke to the smell of pancakes. Javier was in my kitchen, flipping them with a grin. "You're hopeless without me," he teased, sliding a plate across the counter. "Eat. You look like you're about to face a firing squad." I laughed, but it was hollow. Today was Sunday, and Sunday meant church. My dad's congregation, New Hope Baptist, was a cornerstone of our family's life. I hadn't been in weeks, dodging their calls, but today was different. My sister Lena had texted last night, "Dad's asking where you've been. Come tomorrow, please." I didn't tell Javier about church. Instead, I ate his pancakes and let his easy banter pull me out of my head. But when he left for work, promising to call later, the weight settled back in. I showered, pulled on a button-up, and drove to the church in Rainier Valley. The sanctuary was packed, the air thick with gospel music and murmured prayers. My mom spotted me first, her face lighting up as she pulled me into a hug. "Caleb, we've missed you," she said, her eyes searching mine. My dad, tall and imposing in his pastor's robe, gave me a nod from the pulpit. I slid into a pew beside Lena, my stomach churning. The sermon was about truth, how it sets you free, how it demands courage. Every word felt like a jab. I thought of Javier, of the trail, of the life I wanted but wasn't sure I could claim. When the service ended, my dad called me to his office. Lena tagged along, her eyes sharp with concern. "Caleb," Dad said, leaning back in his chair, "you've been distant. What's going on?" I froze. The truth was there, burning in my throat, but the words wouldn't come. Lena touched my arm, her voice soft. "You can tell us, whatever it is." I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But the fear was a vice, fear of their rejection, of the congregation's whispers, of losing the only family I'd ever known. "Just work," I lied. "Been busy." Dad's eyes narrowed, but he let it go. Lena didn't. As we left the church, she pulled me aside. "You're lying," she said flatly. "I know you, Caleb. What's really going on?" I looked at her, my little sister who'd always been my confidant, and something broke. I think I'm in love," I said, my voice barely audible. "With Javier." Her eyes widened, but she didn't flinch. "Okay," she said slowly. "Does he know?" I nodded, my throat tight. "Yeah, it's new." She hugged me, fierce and sudden. "I'm here, okay? Whatever happens." But whatever happens was the problem. That night, I met Javier at a bar in Fremont, a queer-friendly spot with neon signs and a jukebox playing old soul. He was already there, nursing a beer, his smile soft but guarded. "How was church?" he asked. I shrugged, sipping my drink to avoid answering. "Same as always." He didn't push, but I could feel his eyes on me, waiting. We talked about nothing, movies, work, the next hike. But the unspoken hung between us, heavy as the mountain air. When we left, he walked me to my car, his hand brushing mine. "You're still freaking out, aren't you?" he said. "A little," I admitted. "This is big." He nodded, his expression serious. "I know, but I'm not going anywhere." The next week was a blur. I threw myself into work, sketching logos for a new client, but my mind was on Javier. We texted constantly, met for coffee, stole moments that felt like stolen breaths. Every touch, every glance was electric, but the fear never left. I hadn't told my parents, hadn't told anyone but Lena, and the longer I hid, the heavier it felt. Then came the call that changed everything. It was Friday, and I was at my desk when my phone buzzed. It was my mom, her voice tight. "Caleb, your dad's in the hospital. Heart attack." The world tilted. I grabbed my keys and drove to Harborview Medical Center, my pulse racing. Lena was in the waiting room, her eyes red. "He's stable," she said. But it was bad. I sat with her, my mind a storm. When we finally saw Dad, he looked smaller in the hospital bed, his face pale. He took my hand, his grip weak but steady. "Caleb," he said, "life's too short to hide who you are." His words hit like a punch. Did he know? Had Lena told him? Or was it just coincidence? I didn't ask. I just nodded, tears burning my eyes. That night I called Javier. "I need you," I said, my voice breaking. He was at my apartment in 20 minutes, pulling me into his arms. And as I buried my face in his shoulder, I knew I couldn't keep running from the truth. Javier's arms were the only thing keeping me grounded. The hospital's sterile smell clung to my clothes, my dad's words echoing in my head. "Life's too short to hide who you are." I didn't know if he meant it the way I heard it, but it felt like a challenge, a call to be brave. We sat on my couch, Javier's hand resting on my knee. "You want to talk about it?" he asked, his voice soft but steady. I told him about Dad, about the heart attack, about the sermon on truth that had rattled me. I told him about Lena, how she'd held me together when I thought I'd break. And then, haltingly, I told him about me, how I'd spent years denying what I felt, how the kiss on the trail had shattered every lie I'd told myself. "I'm scared," I admitted, staring at the floor. "Not just of my family, but of everything. What it means to be out. What it means for us." Javier leaned closer, his shoulder against mine. "I was scared too when I came out. Still am sometimes. But you don't have to do it alone." I looked at him, his eyes warm and unflinching, and felt a surge of courage. "Will you come with me? To see my dad tomorrow?" He didn't hesitate. "Yeah, of course." The next morning, we drove to the hospital together. Javier wore a navy sweater that made his eyes look deeper, and I caught myself staring. He caught me too, smirking. "Focus on the road, Monroe." At Harborview, Dad was sitting up, looking stronger. Mom and Lena were there, chatting quietly. When they saw Javier, Mom's face lit up. She'd always liked him. But Lena's eyes flicked between us, sensing something new. "Caleb," Dad said, his voice rough. "Who's this?" I swallowed hard. "This is Javier, my boyfriend." The word felt foreign, but right, like a key turning in a lock. Mom's smile faltered, just for a second. Dad's face was unreadable. Lena squeezed my hand under the table. The silence stretched heavy until Dad spoke. "You happy, son?" My throat tightened. "Yeah, I am." He nodded, slow and deliberate. "That's what matters." It wasn't acceptance, not fully, but it was a start. Mom reached for my hand, her eyes teary but warm. "We love you, Caleb. Always." Javier stayed quiet, his presence steady beside me. When we left the hospital, he pulled me into a hug in the parking lot, his lips brushing my forehead. "You did it," he whispered. I laughed, shaky but real. "Barely." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Dad came home, weaker but recovering. Mom asked careful questions about Javier, trying to understand. Lena became my rock, fielding the harder conversations when I couldn't. But the church was another story. Whispers started, sidelong glances during services. I stopped going, unable to face the judgment. Javier noticed. One night, as we cooked dinner in his tiny apartment, he set down his knife and turned to me. "You're pulling away," he said. "Not from me, but from you. What's going on?" I stirred the sauce, avoiding his eyes. It's the church. My family's tied to it, and I don't know how to fit there anymore. He stepped closer, his hand on my arm. You don't have to fit their mold. You make your own. His words stayed with me, but the fear didn't fade. I loved Javier. Loved the way he challenged me, the way he made me laugh, the way he made me feel seen. But the world outside our bubble was harsh. At work, I overheard a coworker's snide comment about the gay designer. On social media, old friends unfollowed me. Each jab chipped away at the courage I'd found on the trail. Then came the letter. It was from the church board, addressed to my dad. They'd heard about me, about Javier, and they wanted a meeting to discuss the family's role in the congregation. It said, but the subtext was clear. I was a problem. I showed Javier the letter, my hands shaking. They're gonna ask him to choose, I said. Me or the church? Javier read it, his jaw tight. This is bullshit. You're his son. I know, but it's his life. His calling. He grabbed my shoulders, his eyes fierce. You're not a problem, Caleb. You're not a sin. You're you, and that's enough. I wanted to believe him, but the doubt was a tide, pulling me under. That night, I lay awake, Javier's arm across my chest, and wondered if love was worth this cost. The meeting was set for a Saturday at the church. I didn't want to go, but Dad asked me to. Not for them, he said. For me. Javier came with me, his hand in mine as we walked into the sanctuary. The board was there. 5 men and women, faces stern. My dad stood at the front, his posture rigid. I braced for the worst. But then Dad spoke, his voice steady. My son is not a debate. He's my blood, and I love him. If that's a problem, you'll have to find a new pastor. The room went silent. My heart stopped. Javier's grip tightened, grounding me. The board didn't push back. Not then. But I knew this wasn't the end. As we left, Javier pulled me close. Your dad's a badass, he said. I laughed, tears in my eyes. Yeah, he is. The weeks after the church meeting were a tightrope. Dad's stand had bought us time, but the congregation was divided. Some rallied behind him, preaching love and acceptance. Others left, their absence a quiet rebuke. I felt responsible, like my truth had fractured the only home my family had ever known. Javier was my anchor. We spent evenings exploring Seattle's hidden corners. Hole-in-the-wall taco joints, bookstores with creaky floors, parks where we'd lie on the grass and talk about nothing and everything. Each moment with him was a reminder that love could be a rebellion, a quiet act of defiance against a world that wanted to box us in. But the weight of the church lingered. I'd catch Mom staring out the window, worry etched into her face. Lena told me the board was still meeting, debating Dad's future. I wanted to fix it, to take back my truth, but Javier wouldn't let me. You don't apologize for who you are, he said one night, his voice fierce as we sat on his balcony, the city lights sprawling below. Not ever. I nodded, but the guilt was a shadow. I started therapy, a quiet recommendation from Lena. My therapist, a woman named Dr. Ellis, had a warm voice and sharp questions. She pushed me to unpack the years of shame, the fear of disappointing my family, the way I'd internalized every sermon that called love like mine a sin. It was slow, painful work, but it helped me see Javier's love as a gift, not a burden. One rainy afternoon, I got a call from Dad. We need to talk, he said. Come to the house. My stomach dropped. Javier offered to come, but I needed to face this alone. When I arrived, Dad was in the living room, his Bible open on the coffee table. Mom sat beside him, her hands clasped tight. "Caleb," Dad started, his voice heavy, "the board's made a decision. They're asking me to step down." The words hit like a physical blow. "Because of me?" I said, my voice flat. "No," he said firmly. "Because of them. They're choosing fear over faith. But I'm not done fighting." Mom reached for my hand. "We're proud of you, Caleb. This isn't your fault." I wanted to believe them, but the tears came anyway. When I got back to Javier's, he held me until I could breathe again. "They'll be okay," he said. "And so will you." He was right. Dad didn't leave the church, he started his own. A small, inclusive congregation that met in a community center, welcoming everyone, no exceptions. It wasn't New Hope, but it was hope, raw and real. Mom threw herself into organizing, Lena led the youth group, and I started showing up, Javier by my side. The first service was chaotic, mismatched chairs, a borrowed projector, a playlist of gospel songs on someone's phone. But as Dad spoke about love as the greatest commandment, I felt something shift. I wasn't just Caleb, the pastor's son, or Caleb, the gay designer. I was Caleb, whole and enough. That spring, Javier and I went back to Storm Point. The trail was the same, but we were different, stronger, surer. When we reached the outcrop, the view was as breathtaking as before, but this time I wasn't afraid. I took Javier's hand, pulling him close. "I love you," I said, the words steady true. He smiled, his eyes bright. "Took you long enough to say it." We kissed, the wind carrying our laughter across the peaks. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There were still hard days, still fights to face. But we'd built something real, something worth fighting for. As we hiked down, Javier slung an arm around my shoulders. "You ever think about where we'll be in 10 years?" he asked. I grinned. Still hiking, still arguing about whose playlist is better. He laughed, pulling me closer. And still us. The trail stretched ahead, winding through the unknown. But for the first time, I wasn't scared of the path. I had Javier, my family, myself, and that was enough.